2022. We just crested through the Youngkin victory, a clean sweep for Republicans in the Commonwealth of Virginia. And now we're focused on the midterms. And this is primary season. That means a lot of great candidates who are looking to get nominated for their respective parties will be coming in here and making their case to us and, more importantly, to the voters of Maryland and Virginia. Are you ready? Are you ready for this process?
I'm ready. Let's do this thing.
All right. Let's bring in right now Derrick Anderson. Derrick Anderson is a candidate for the Republican nomination in Virginia 7th. That's currently represented by Democrat Abigail Spanberger. And Derrick Anderson, by the way, a native of Spotsylvania County. He's got his Virginia Tech undergrad in the Corps of Cadets. He then got his law degree out of Georgetown Law. Hoya Sachs out there. Hoya. Amber's a Hoya, you know. Derrick.
That's right.
And then he is joined the Army Special Forces Green Beret, 6 tours of duty, including Afghanistan and Iraq. And he joins us now. My gosh, you've already done enough service to the country, Derrick Anderson. What are you doing wanting to join that cesspool in Congress?
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. Hey, just because you don't wear the uniform doesn't mean you can't keep serving. That's the goal here, to get in Congress and serve our country in a different capacity.
Well, it seems to me there's 2 reasons why someone would want to run for Congress. Number one, because you want to, be a part of that legislative body of 435 so you can make a difference. And also, number 2, your current representative in your district is woefully inadequate for the job at hand. So why don't you approach both of those things and make the case why you should be the new congressman for Virginia 7?
Sure. So first and foremost, you mentioned, Larry, that I served overseas or 6 deployments, include Iraq and Afghanistan, as a Green Beret. And the catalyst for me to run for office, because back in August of 21, I was not planning on doing this, but was watching the botched withdrawal in Afghanistan. I lost 5 of my guys in Afghanistan, 2 of my Green Berets included. And I was pretty disheartened at what had happened and the failed policies by the Biden administration. Look, they had an extreme lack of accountability and a lack of leadership during the botched withdrawal and since then. And so I decided I wasn't going to sit on the sidelines. I was sick and tired of screaming at the television like most of us were. So I decided that it was time for me to stand up and serve my country in a different capacity. And you mentioned Abigail Spanberger specifically. She's failed to live up to the promises that she made to the constituents of the 7th District. And I'll give you a few examples, Larry. Back in January of 2021, she was talking with Nancy Pelosi, and she said, enough with the defund the police stuff. But what's interesting is what she said after the fact. It wasn't because it was bad for our communities and made them unsafe, or the fact that it denigrated the service of our men and women in blue, but she said, because I'm going to lose my seat in Congress. Because to her, it's a title. It's a title to her, right? If you fast forward Afghanistan, she waits until 2 days before the withdrawal is complete, or before it's supposed to be complete, and the day 13 U.S. service members are killed, before she steps up and says, hey, there's an issue in Afghanistan. With the infrastructure bill, she waits 2.5 weeks for every deadline to pass, and then and only then does she pens an op-ed in the Richmond Times and says, hey, there's an issue with the infrastructure bill, then goes and votes for it. And then lastly, you mentioned Glenn Youngkin. 2 days after he wins and becomes the next governor of Virginia, she goes to the New York Times and says, hey, President Biden, no one elected you to be the next FDR, and your policies are chaos. So Abigail Spanberger is an opportunist. She waits until the political headwinds are blowing in a certain direction, and then and only then does she make a decision.
Yeah, well, let's talk more about former President Joe Biden and his involvement in this race, because after Abigail Spanberger made that comment about FDR, she's now actually going to be campaigning with the president. He's going to come into Virginia and give his endorsement. So I think that speaks further to your suggestion that she is an opportunist. Are you excited to see Joe Biden come here? Because he's a pretty unpopular guy right now.
Yeah, that's an understatement, Amber. So this just goes to show you, well, not only does it show the opportunistic side of her, but it shows that she's desperate. I mean, look, we're in February, and she's bringing the president in right now to bring him in. And that just shows, considering how unpopular he is, that is a pure act of showing that she's desperate. And, they're coming in here to Culpeper, Virginia. The people of Culpeper and the people of the 7th District want answers for all the failed policies that the Biden administration has been behind for the last year. You know, if you take a step back and look at it, whether it's the economy, right? You got inflation at an all-time high. When folks go to the grocery store in the 7th District, if they can find what they're looking for on the shelves, because they can't a lot of times because of the supply chain issues, it costs twice as much. Or if they go to the gas pump, we have a lot of commuters in the 7th District, and it costs twice as much to fill up your tank. Or if it's the rise in crime and the fact that our public safety is at risk right now. Or lastly, just the overarching and overreaching federal government overreach into the district. Specifically, if you look at some of these failed policies in the school with the mask mandates, or our border, for instance, is chaos, and we have crime and fentanyl just coming over the border and spilling into this country. Or, you know, Joe Biden had the FBI investigate our parents for showing dissent at school board meetings. So, I mean, there's just failed policy after failed policy, and Abigail Spanberger is standing right next to him. And, you know, they should be talking about all the failed policies that Joe Biden, Nancy Pelosi, and the progressive Democrats in Washington have been standing behind. And, you know, Abigail Spanberger has voted with Nancy Pelosi over 90% of the time. So if that gives you any indication of how desperate she is, there it is.
We're speaking with Derrick Anderson for VA.com, Derrick Anderson for VA.com. The last Republican, Nick Freitas, who was the nominee in the 7th Congressional District in 2020, on election night, going into Wednesday morning, he had won that seat. And then the mail-in ballots start getting counted. And, we found some other ballots here. And Abigail Spanberger ends up winning by a handful of votes. Now, that's in a year when Republicans did not do very well in Virginia in 2020. This time around, it should be a little different. But are you concerned about how this pattern always seems to emerge with mail-in ballots and with the loose nature in which ballots are validated and counted in Virginia?
So, you know, what I can tell you is that, as you mentioned, Larry, that was in 2020. A lot has changed since 2020, right? If we look at what's happened since 2020, we've got 2021, Glenn Youngkin, Jason Miyares, Winston Sears, the three of them come in and sweep Virginia, the ticket. We've got the House of Delegates in Virginia switching over. I mean, the momentum is moving forward, and it's fantastic that Glenn Youngkin is keeping that momentum pushing forward. And then, you know, not to rehash all the things I just talked about with the failed policies of Biden over and over and over again, I equate it to watching the movie Bambi, if you've ever seen it, where Bambi is like running around on the ice and just keeps falling and falling and falling. And you kind of look and say, why don't you step off to the side and maybe stand up? Well, you can only watch them fall so many times before you say, what the heck is going on here? So for us in 2022, we're looking good. I think that the Republicans are going to do really great, and I'm looking forward to taking back the House in 2022 and retiring Nancy Pelosi. And we, as Republicans, have a great path forward.
I did not expect the badass Green Beret to make a Bambi analogy, but there you go. He's a Renaissance man, Derrick Anderson. We, of course, are not going to take a position during the primaries. We want any Republican to do well here, and we will back whoever wins this primary, generally speaking. But Derrick Anderson, I hope to have more conversations with you as we lead up to the primary in June. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, guys.
Derrick Anderson.